Betty Jean Ferguson was born in Waterloo, Iowa. She grew up in a middle-class family. Her father was a prominent medical doctor in the Waterloo community, and her mother was the first African-American teacher in the Waterloo public schools. At an early age, she learned from her parents to contribute back to her community, appreciate people, and not to take her freedom and rights for granted. A few years after her high school graduation, she obtained a bachelor's degree from the University of Northern Iowa and a master's of social work degree from the University of Kansas. Shortly after obtaining her MSW, she became director of Waterloo Human Rights Commission. Her immense human relations skills enabled her to serve effectively on major boards such as Afro-American Community Broadcasting, Inc., Waterloo Community School Board, Iowa State Board of Regents, Iowa Public Television Foundation Board, and others. Her countless contributions to Waterloo and across the state of Iowa led to her induction into the Iowa Women's Hall of Fame. When and where were you born?
Okay. I was born March 10th, 1927 in Waterloo, Iowa.
What schools did you attend there?
Okay. I went to Grant Elementary, and then I went to East Junior High, which was 7th and 8th grade, and it was where City Hall is now in Waterloo. And then I went to East High. That's where I graduated from.
What year did you graduate from East?
1945.
From there, you would go on to college. You would go on
Yes.
to a historically black college.
Yeah, I went
university.
2 years to college in Talladega, Alabama, where they do the car racing.
But tell me about how you came to make a decision to go to Talladega, this HBCU.
Daddy wanted us to go to one of the historical black colleges, and we sort of had maybe been thinking about Fisk, but Martha Ann really got interested in Talladega. So she went there. She graduated 2 years before I did. And so when I graduated, I went there. Martha Ann was supposed to go for 2 years and go to the University of Minnesota and get her degree in journalism, but she got down there and she liked it, and she stayed and graduated from Talladega as a history major. And so I went down. I only went 2 years, then I transferred to the University of Iowa.
Okay, interesting. So, interesting experience there for you at Talladega.
Oh,
then.
let me tell you, it was the best experience I ever had. We learned so much from a black perspective.
You would graduate from there.
No, I didn't graduate
Excuse
from there.
me.
I
Okay,
transferred.
That's right. Okay, then you would go to the University of Iowa.
Yeah.
Is that correct? Okay, so
Yeah,
you spent
and it
some
was
time.
a drastic change.
Okay. Yeah.
Drastic. Well, the change was, first of all, University of Iowa was a much larger school, predominantly white. I had a very difficult time making an adjustment to that campus. And one of the reasons I didn't go to Iowa U when I first graduated is because they wouldn't let black students live in the dormitory. And so my father said, no, you're not going there. When by the time I transferred there, they had opened the dormitories to black students, so I lived in Courier Hall. But basically, both the men's and women's dorms, to take black students, you had to either be a resident of Iowa, or you had to be the child of someone who graduated from the University of Iowa. They were still, And Ames, Iowa State University, still wasn't letting black students stay in the dorm, nor were they here.
At the University of Northern Iowa.
Yeah, which was then Iowa State Teachers College.
Okay.
Yeah,
all right, okay.
So
Okay.
you had all those kind of dynamics to deal with.
Your father, he's a very interesting figure. Just briefly, how growing up, tell us a little bit about him, how growing up he might have influenced you, or he did influence you.
Well, he influenced all of us in a lot of ways. Daddy loved to travel. Some of our trips were around his going to NAACP national meetings that were in different places. He saw to it that we were on the college campus of historically black colleges. So we met people who were college presidents and college professors, and I can remember one year in Richmond, we got to, my dad had always been very active in NAACP, so we met people like Thurgood Marshall.
What was it like when do you remember the day you met Thurgood Marshall? Because this is a national figure here.
Well, it was in Richmond, Virginia. I don't know, because he was in Iowa several times. The thing about him is his mother. I'd known something about it because his mother and Mrs. Morris, Georgine Morris in Des Moines, her husband published a Bystander there.
Yes.
We're very close friends. Mrs. Morris originally was from Baltimore, and she used to talk about him, you know. And one of the things I remember she used to do when because he always had a good sense of humor, and he always, you know, liked to tease. And she'd tell him things like, Thurgood, I remember I used to change your diapers. But he you know, he had a terrific sense of humor, but he could be very serious, and he was very serious about the whole civil rights thing. Walter White was Roy Wilkins. Those were all people we met. I remember meeting Mary McLeod Bethune.
Oh, okay.
You know,
okay.
and
Roy
I
Wilkins.
felt like,
Roy Wilkins.
Well, my dad had known Roy Wilkins when Wilkins lived in St. Paul. His father was a minister, and he was in St. Paul in high school. And my dad used to, in the summers, my dad ran on the railroad. Working when he was in medical school, so he had known Wilkins since he was very young.
Mary McLeod Bethune. Mary McLeod
Bethune.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Okay.
When you went to the NAACP in those days, those were the kind of people who were involved. You know, there were just all those different kinds of people that you got to meet, and I think it was good for us because growing up in Waterloo, where most black folks worked at Rass and at Deers, and they worked in the hard jobs like the foundry at Deers and the kiln, you know, at Rass. It gave you a chance to see that there were other things in this part of the world that you know that people could do, even though you very often didn't meet people like that in Iowa doing those kind of jobs. So,
but and also, I mean, you talk about that. You talk about your father, type of job he had in Waterloo. I mean, he's a professional.
He was a doctor. Yeah.
Yeah, he was a doctor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think I'll never forget this because Daddy did never. Is the fact that when he came here, Dr. Thornton, Tom Thornton Sr., made sure my father joined the medical society and went to medical society meetings. Daddy was on the staff at St. Francis Hospital. I don't think he did much at Allen Hospital, but he did at St. Francis. And so Dr. Thornton kind of, you know, really paved the way for him.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about your mother briefly.
Okay. My mother was born in Des Moines, and her education was different. Her mother worked, and at one time she was the wardrobe mistress for the Princess Theater, which was a repertory theater that traveled about 6 months of the year. In those days, you know, there's vaudeville and a lot of things like that, so there were a lot of traveling show business kind of things and theaters to play in. And so some of that time, my mother, my mother would be living with her grandmother in Cedar, Missouri. And so when she was in school in Cedar, she went to an all-black school, and when she was in school in Des Moines, she went to a school that was predominantly white. My mother's mother had a college degree. She graduated from Philander Smith in Little Rock, Arkansas, and she taught school for 2 years in Louisiana before she came back to Iowa. When she got back to Iowa, she couldn't teach school here. But I think her sister taught at junior college in Cedar. She taught at the same junior college where Scott Joplin taught music. Okay. And so, you know, she had a number of aunts, you know, who were teachers, and she had an uncle who was a funeral director in Cedar, and so that they were kind of moving up kind of family.
This is good because now all these influences you would get, it would help you to be a major impact within the community. Let's talk about your first professional job that you would get.
Okay.
No, I think
Let me say, being a major, if I was, I don't know if I was, but being involved in the community was something that I always expected that I should do, because that's what my parents did.
Right.
And so I was sort of following their examples. You know, I think they would have been disappointed if I, didn't do the things I should do. They used to tell me things like, they'd say things like, if you think that we did things for you that, were helpful, you don't owe us thanks. You have a debt you have to pay back to another generation.
Right, absolutely. And you paid it back.
Yeah, well, I've taken a lot of responsibilities on, because I knew I would learn things that I would have no other way to learn. And you can't learn everything from a book.
Right.
If you want to gain wisdom, you have to have some life experiences, and you have to have contact with people, because that's how I think one learns wisdom. You don't learn wisdom from books. You learn wisdom from life experiences.
Okay. Tell me about your first professional job. You was with the Girl Scouts.
Yeah, I was district advisor of Conestoga Council of Girl Scouts, and I got the job kind of as a fluke, because when I graduated from college, I couldn't get a teaching job because my major was in secondary education, and the secondary schools in Waterloo were not ready to hire a black person yet. I had never been a Girl Scout, although growing up we had gotten American Girl magazine, which is their publications, and I always wanted to be a Girl Scout, but there wasn't a Girl Scout council in Waterloo when I was growing up. There was in Cedar Falls, but not Waterloo. But it was a good choice for me, because the executive director was willing to mentor me, and she taught me a lot of things, and I really learned a lot about how to be an administrator. She was a very good administrator. She taught me how to build budgets, and just many of those kinds of things. I did learn a lot about working with volunteers, working with people, doing some planning and those kinds of things, and I think it was one of the best experiences I had to prepare me for the kinds of jobs that would come later.
Okay, let's talk about because from there you would, in fact, you would be there for about approximately 10 years, and then you would move on, and you would look in the political arena briefly. You looked at the political arena.
Yeah, I took a leave of absence and ran for the state legislature and lost.
Okay, now this is good. No, this is important. I think it's very important.
It was.
You make this move.
Yeah.
You make this move. Tell me, why did you make the move? Why did you make it? And even though you lost, that's okay. What did you learn from that experience?
Well, I made the move because once in a while you have to take chances, and I was at the point I had been very involved in politics, particularly on the local state level, mostly on state Democrat, and it was, I think, the time when we really began talking with people I worked with in the black community about the fact that we need to give black people a reason to vote. And so we need to have candidates, black people run as candidates. And so I was willing to do it, and I probably was one of the less offensive people to some of the white people in the party who backed me, so I ran. And I did learn some things. I lost, but I lost the election, but I didn't lose by the experience. And I think I learned a lot of practical politics, and I got to know a lot of people. I started applying for jobs, and I finally got a job when they started a homemaker home service office under Family Services, and I went there. And I worked there for about 2 years, and then I left that job because OEO had decided they weren't going to fund those kind of programs anymore. They should come from the Department of Health. Before I did that, I knew eventually I was going to graduate school.
At the University of Kansas.
Yeah, I went to KU, and they were using systems theory. It made me see the world very differently than I had before. It made it possible to sit down and talk with people in an interdisciplinary way, using systems theory, because you don't put the onus on individual human beings. You look at how human beings operate within a system, and what happens, and how sometimes systems keep people from fulfilling, what they want to do.
So you come back. You come back. You have this degree. You have this education. You come back to the Waterloo community, and you use this degree to get things done. Okay. You use this skill set, this knowledge base, to get things done within the community. Let's talk about your work experience or your tenure at the Human Rights Office.
Okay, Human Rights was a grantee agency for a grant from the Title VII, the Emergency School Aid Act, to work with, have programs to work with the community to help in the school desegregation process in Waterloo. That's what it was. And so my role was probably mostly administrative and interpretive, and really watching, making sure the programs were doing what they were supposed to do. Okay, so that's what it was. The background of what we were doing was working with schools, so there was an educational concept, and some of the things, for example, that, you know, the staff in, you know, like teachers and principals and teachers' aides and so on, the schools would need in order to make the desegregation program be successful, and for the kids to have a successful experience in those schools and their parents. So that's really what it was about. I was lucky that I had a lot of visibility. You know, being a black person in Iowa, where a lot of white people never know black people, and it's easy to be remembered if you're consistent and if you do what you say you're going to do, and if maybe you have a little smarts and you have some ideas about doing things, you get asked to do things. And I always took the things that I really cared about deeply. You know, I never took anything to do just for the sake of having something to do, because I had enough other things to do. But if it was something that I was very passionate about, I would say yes. And so areas like education, community organization, you know, how to get people involved in the political structure, those are things I was passionate about. So doing those kind of things came very natural to me. Let's
talk about how you would move on to the next level. You would be director.
Well, the director left, and I applied for the job. And I got it. And one of the things that had happened when I was doing my field work in graduate school was I was working with the Leavenworth Human Rights Commission that had no paid staff, and I was trying to demonstrate what a paid staff person could do with a commission. So I got something there. But one of the things you need to understand is all my life, because of my parents, I have been interested in human rights. You know, all my life, you know. There are things that, you know, Daddy and Muddy said, you know, at the swing show, we couldn't be in the swing show at East High because they had segregated acts, and blacks had a separate act, you know. So all those kinds of things. So you know, gone to NAACP conventions, you know, we get together, family and friends, and these were things that they'd talk about. You know, we always took like the Pittsburgh Courier and Chicago Defender and the Iowa Bystander. So I read all the stuff, and I, you know, met people who were doing things, and so it was just something that I felt was my responsibility as a human being on Earth. And it's not just what happened to people here in the United States, but I get concerned about people whose rights are not treated properly throughout the world. You know, my feeling is if they can ever do it to somebody else, they can do it to me.
You would spend the rest of your professional life as the director. From that position, what was probably the biggest challenge of that position, or what was the biggest? What kept you busy the most working that position?
Well, really trying to keep relationships between various community groups and individuals going, you know. So that's one thing.
But that's
our biggest complaints always were employment. Because employment gets at whether you can have a place to live and have food and have clothing on your back. Housing, people didn't really fight that, you know, too much. and but they really would, when it was employment discrimination, you know, that if they felt they were being discriminated by not being hired or how they were treated as an employee or something, they would file a complaint. I tend to see what's going on now is kind of a backsliding, and if we are not careful, if we are not aware as African Americans what's being done to us and to people who are maybe sort of in some ways in the same boat we are, you know, we could lose some of the things that happen. One of the
progress is not as it looks.
That's right. One of the things that we have to learn is nothing stays here forever. You have to fight for things. You have to keep on top of what's going on.
While you were working, you know, these jobs professionally, at the same time you were also working with, you were sitting on boards.
Oh, I was doing a lot of volunteer stuff in the community.
A lot of stuff
yeah.
while you were holding these positions.
But they were all related.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's, you know, I know you were sitting, you worked with the KBBG. You worked on that board there, the black radio station here in Waterloo. Also, you were on the Lily Ferguson Child Development Board there. And you were on
Waterloo School Board.
The Waterloo School Board.
12 years.
You were on the IPTV board, and currently are still there, and a whole host of other boards. And let's talk about specifically the Lily Ferguson one, because I think that's interesting, because that center is named after your mother. Is that correct? Okay. Tell me a little bit about that, and just kind of what you did on the board.
They had an open house one Sunday, and it was in August. I'll never forget. And people could come in. They had names of 3 women that people who came there could vote to name the center after. One was Mrs. Full of Love, one was Dora Terry, and my mother. And most of the people voted for my mother, so that's how I became Lily Ferguson Child Development Center. But I had a great niece and a great nephew, both who were children there, you know, Laura's 2 kids. And I've seen some really good staff come through there and some good things happen. I think the American culture places no emphasis on children because they cost money and they don't make money. That's my theory. But if you look at what's done in other cultures and other countries, much more is given to, you know, the whole thing of early childhood. The other thing that's happened is things have changed so much. We don't always agree on the same, you know, mores. The same things that should happen, and so it's not like you go to Japan where you have a society of people that are pretty much the same, and so you don't have a lot of difference. We have a lot of people who come here from other countries who other cultures, you know, and so there's kind of a clash sometimes about, you know, things that need to happen. I don't know, but anyway, I just think that as a culture and a society, we don't give parents as much help as they really need. And that's all I can say. I've never been a parent, but I got 27, I got 23 nieces and nephews, and that many great nieces and nephews. So I have some, you know, those are my kids.
Yes, you have a lot of love.
All kids are my kids. I tell everyone, you know.
Let's talk about your role to the Waterloo School Board. There. I mean, this is important. There's a lot of things that you would do there. You would be involved with there, serving on the board here for the district.
I understand how a lot of black people feel about schools because there's so many of them who've had such negative experiences with schools, and sometimes going to the school is like going to jail, you know, and I understand those feelings. And you sit down and talk to people, and then they tell you about their experiences, and you understand why they feel the way they do. But for the most part, what I saw, white staff in the schools don't see that because, you know, they tend to think that black people don't care about their kids. And they also somehow haven't been able to realize that some of the stuff that you do as a parent takes a lot of psychic energy, and when you're using a lot of that just to survive and see your kids have food and clothing and a place to live, there isn't much left for other things. And so I don't know, I don't know how you can get people to see and understand that if they really, well, they may have experienced it, but they see it as different. They can't see the similarity. Some people look through a telescope and they don't look at how system affects people. I succeeded in getting the discipline policies changed because our kids were being thrown out of school and suspended left and right, and sometimes if their parents wouldn't come to a hearing when they were thinking about putting them out, I wanted parents need to be there, and the parents' reaction was very correct. They said, "Why should I be there? This won't change a thing," which it didn't. It didn't. Okay. So what I started doing, I started when I'd get to the hearings, when they were going to have a discipline hearing, and is I'd call a friend of mine who was working in the legal aid office. And when they caught on to what was going on, they kept giving the information in advance of board meetings. But I did save some kids.
Yeah,
I did save some kids,
This is good strategy. Good strategy.
Yeah, well, and it gave a different tone to the hearings because she was an attorney, and she had been a teacher. I put a lot of emphasis on their continuing to try to hire minority faculty, particularly black faculty. The one thing that that I was really concerned about is a number of African American students, and at that time we didn't have many Hispanic or students from Native American, but who were taking college prep courses. I wanted to make sure that the counselors or somebody was letting them know, if you don't take algebra and you don't take geometry, you don't take English, you don't take a foreign language, your chances of getting college are going to be very, very few and small. So I think that's another thing I think I did.
Okay, all right. Let's talk just briefly about you working with the Iowa State Board of Regents. Just briefly.
Okay. One term.
One term?
6 years.
6 years. Okay.
Yeah,
all right.
Yeah.
Give me one example of what you gained from that, or what you accomplished.
Well, I guess one of the things I gained from that is I was very upset about the affirmative action programs the universities had. And I found out the person in the regent's office who was supposed to be doing it wasn't doing what he was supposed to be doing. So Marv Pomerantz, who was president at that time, said, well, I'll fix it up. And so he set a study committee up on affirmative action, made me chair, and put the 3 regents who were the most open to what I was talking about on that committee. So we really did some pushing and got some things done. And I think particularly Iowa U and Iowa State have really done a good job, much better than U and I.
Okay, all right. Let's talk about another board that you served on, that you're still serving on. Let's talk about you're serving on the board, your tenure with IPTV. When did that start in?
Well, I went on the board, I think it was 1980.
Okay.
And I've forgotten one year in the 80s I became president of the board, but I've been president a long time. Thanks to Bob Ray, who was governor then, I got appointed to that board. And it's probably been one of the most enjoyable board experiences I've ever had. It's not that there haven't been some glitches every once in a while, but basically they have a really good staff, and they've always had a staff that's willing to try to find ways to do things. And I've been very conscious of the fact that and reminded them all the for example in the children's programming, that all the children who watch are not white, and that they need to make sure there's a mix of kids, and I think they do it now. I think they do it. And what they do for programming. So it's one of the things I'm really proud of, and sometimes money keeps them from doing more. We're not a station that produces for the whole system. Most of the programs that they make for showing are made about Iowa and in Iowa, but they do have a couple of programs that are shown on the system.
Lastly, you've served on all these boards. You've done a number of things within the community, across the state, working with people. Tell me, what was it like when you were when you got the notice that you were being inducted to the Iowa Women's Hall of Fame?
Well,
what was
kind
that
of
like?
a surprise. The person who recommended me, I had worked with she was in the Department of Education. I had worked on the equity committee with her and so on, and she wrote the letter. Okay. And so when I got the letter from that I was going to be appointed to that, I was kind of astounded, because I thought the first person in the family would get that would be my sister Martha Ann. You know, the reason I guess I was astounded is you don't do these things to get credit. If you're expecting to get credit for what you do, forget about it. But you do it because it's necessary, and that's kind of like the icing on the, you know, something or other, a cake, you know. Okay. But it was nice. Okay. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for sharing your story with me. I appreciate it. It's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you.